Judge Joe Brown's all-new barbecue sauce and seasoning. Justice in the form of flavor.
Law firms will take this as a retainer.
What? It must be a law firm where they hungry as hell. Now you gonna help me with this parole I'm dealing with?
Judge Joe Brown's all-new barbecue sauce and seasoning. Justice in the form of flavor. With one taste of our premium blends of all-natural ingredients, herbs, and spices, you'll fall in love with meat all over again. Judge Joe Brown's all-natural barbecue sauce collection is made up of 2 zesty flavors, original and spicy. There's only one way to bring order back to barbecuing. Just add Judge Joe Brown's all-natural barbecue sauce and seasoning, and you be the judge.
Trump will end birthright citizenship. The president said he would end birthright citizenship, the right of children born in the U.S. to claim citizenship regardless of their parents' immigration status. The 14th Amendment guarantees American citizenship to anyone born in the U.S.
Well, he's going to have to do something about that. He signed the order. I think that will be surplusage because there's a constitutional amendment, the 14th Amendment, that speaks to that, and an executive order can't override it. Another thing, even if it could, it's more properly within the domain of a legislative body, which will have to propose an amendment to an amendment. So, wowee. See, there's a lot. See, he's not formally trained in law. I think his motivation is good, but there's some things you can do and some things you cannot do. And even Biden, who nominally was trained to an extent in the law, at least he went to law school, though he seems to have had problems because of plagiarism while he was there. And I don't know whether he actually graduated, and he's never practiced law, but he ought to have known, but he did some things that are not supported by the Constitution and out the window, because in our scheme of government, at least since 1803, which is 232 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court declared in Marbury versus Madison that appellate courts have the authority to declare acts of Congress unconstitutional, and also actions of presidents, by the way. So,
well, this is a quick 46-second clip of him talking about the birthright citizenship as he signs the executive order.
I met with numerous foreign leaders. Go ahead.
Sir, this next order relates to the definition of birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment of the United States.
Yeah, that's a good one. Birthright. That's a big one.
What about that one? And of course, that one is likely to be.
Could be. So I think we have good grounds, but you could be right. I mean, you'll find out. It's ridiculous.
Well,
we're the only country in the world
right.
that does this with birthright, as you know. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. But, you know, we'll see. We think we have very good grounds.
Sir,
people have wanted to do this for decades.
Sir, this is a proclamation.
See, what's happening here is I locked up people, parents who were convicted and their probation requests were denied. So what did you do with the children? The parents a U.S. citizen, the child's a U.S. citizen. Well, somebody was assigned the custody of the children, usually Child Protective Services, and they went into an institutionalized situation. Well, the same thing here. These are American citizens under birthright citizenship, and if the parents are criminals who, in the course of their criminality, became criminals by invading the border, then you deprive them of their children. They're left here and they're raised in America and they become resources, unless for humanitarian purposes you allow them to go back with the parents, and that means they now have dual citizenship, which could be a pain. But the parents brought it on their children, and that becomes, what is it? Child abuse. That becomes dependency and neglect when it comes to a child. So the parents pay the cost for their criminality. You know, you just don't walk across the border like that. Where they came from, for the most part, you walk across the border, you get caught, you get shot on the spot.
Well, a lot of people, particularly black people, some black people, are saying that if he ends birthright citizenship, then it's going to affect Black Americans.
Oh, how?
Right. It won't. It can't.
That's the
If it-
stupid
if it's gonna-
nonsense of a slave sitting there trying to defend the plantation is behind as a slave on.
Right, because if it's going to affect Black Americans, then it's going to affect white Americans. So, yeah,
I challenge anybody that said that kind of stupidity to a test on their constitutional awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Guess
Right.
who will win?
Because, like he said, any other country in this world, they don't have that policy. So
No, they don't.
if my mother's pregnant with me as an American or whatever, but she's in another country and gives birth, I don't have any claim to that country.
Well, yes, you do. But here's the problem.
No, that country will say I'm not a citizen.
You're a dual citizen.
They won't even give you that.
You know who has a problem with that? Who was a candidate against this man for president in 2016? Was Cruz. He was born in Canada, so he had dual citizenship, and under the Constitution, he's not born on American soil. Therefore, even though he is certainly a citizen, he is ineligible to be president of the United States.
No. He didn't. He got dual citizenship, and when he applied.
No, that's not the point. He was born in Canada. He had effective dual citizenship automatically because his parents were American, but he was born on Canadian soil. When he ran for president against Donald Trump in 2016, what wound up happening is he was basically second runner-up. So the problem is that constitutionally, if he had been the nominee for the Republican Party, he would have been ineligible because he was not born on American soil.
I get that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if my mother or if I gave birth in another country, my parents are American citizen. So if they gave birth in China, I can't have dual citizenship.
Yeah, you can.
If my mother gave birth to me in Mexico, no, I have no citizenship, no dual citizenship in Mexico.
Yeah, you do. You couldn't run for president if you were born in a foreign country. After World War II, they had some interesting matters that got to the U.S. Supreme Court. What they concerned was Japanese who were born in the United States. Their parents were naturalized American citizens, so they were citizens. They went back to visit relatives in Japan while pregnant, had children back in the 1920s who were born in Japan to full-fledged, born in America parents, but they had dual citizenship with Japan and the United States. These individuals, unfortunately for some of them, wound up being in Japan visiting relatives when Pearl Harbor went down. Japan claimed that they were Japanese citizens and drafted them into the Army and Navy as translators, and they got prosecuted for treason when the war was over and they returned back to the United States. They were born to an American citizen who just happened to be of Japanese, they were of Japanese extraction, visiting relatives in the early part of the 20th century. They were born in Japan. Japan claimed them as natural-born Japanese citizens and forcibly inducted them into the Japanese military and naval forces.
Oh, so then Trump is wrong.
Yes, he's wrong.
He said in this clip, we are the only country that does that. And apparently we're not.
Yeah, that's right. That's a unique thing about the U.S. Constitution, but it's not quite correct. Look at Winston Churchill. His father was an English lord. His mother was a Chicago department store heiress. He had dual citizenship, which he had renounced to become Sir Winston. And he was otherwise an American citizen. Now, what I'm saying is go back and check what he said. They brought it up to him and he said, well, that may be, you might be right. but that can be dealt with at a later time. He's acknowledging that what he's doing may have flaws. But the point of the exercise is sometimes you have to take the initiative and test the system. You have to say, this may look bad, but let's see if we can deal with it. It's like tax. You have a very complex tax situation and you got a client. You tell the client what the risks are and say, hey, look, we have a chance, but I can't guarantee that we will prevail. So let's throw it in the hopper, send it to IRS. And if they bust us on it, we acted in good faith. And the worst you're going to have to do is pay back something with interest, which will likely be at a lower rate than you could get from a bank. So in other words, try it. That's what he's doing. Throwing it in the hopper to see if it goes out and it survives. Probably won't, but
so
it's
if
good.
all these other countries, the birthright citizenship is a common thing throughout the world.
Yes.
So what is he talking about then? Why is he?
Well, what he's saying is we have a problem right now where they're using that to get anchor babies so nobody deports them. What they fail to realize and have for a number of decades is that the reason we have this thing about them being anchor babies is we're trying to act in a humanitarian fashion to keep from splitting up families. But traditionally and under international law, you can do just that. So the point is the parent dealt with dependency and neglect with the child, broke the law, and left the child adrift. So that is a future citizen of the, well, it's a citizen, a future productive citizen of the United States. We don't necessarily have to let that child return to, as Trump puts it, some shithole of a third world country. And that's why they left the shithole of the third world country, where you go, they have open sewers that are ditches rather than enclosed in pipes buried underground. The water is brown because it's contaminated, and you're a fool if you don't boil it or drink bottled water or beer or Coca-Cola. So there are a whole lot of differences between where we are right now and the United rest of the world. We have some laws that nobody else in the world has. Britain comes close, but they failed because we used them as a springboard. And we learned and we saw the British system, and what was it? No taxation without representation. We are English subjects, but we're not treated that way. When in the course of human events, it becomes, et cetera, et cetera. That's
I think the difference is, whereas if you are an American citizen and you go to another country and give birth, and if you are a citizen from another country, as opposed to coming here and giving birth, to where as soon as you give birth here, but you're a citizen in another country, it's like the paperwork is limited to probably one piece of paper, as opposed if I'm in another if I'm an American and I give birth in another country, you have to go through multiple hoops in order to claim your child to have citizenship or dual citizenship there, to where it's less of a hassle if you just gave birth here.
Well,
what do you call that?
Yeah, you're right. But
more red tape.
Yeah, but you're right. But see, nobody anticipated a mass crashing of the border. It just wasn't done. I had to go through this because my last wife, last ex-wife, she had dual citizenship between the U.S. and Canada because her mama was a Canadian citizen and her daddy was from Memphis and a U.S. citizen. So we went through that, resolving the situation 25 years ago when we first got married. So, yeah, I'm familiar with the process. Now, when you are an American citizen and you are abroad, if you happen to be pregnant, likely as not, your pregnancy is being developed while you're on a military, naval, or air base. So that is held to be American territory, so you are an American citizen. They also have certain situations where in certain embassies, in certain very limited circumstances, under certain consulate situations, they have places where if this consulate has a certain status with the host country, it becomes American soil. Embassies are automatically American soil. And if you have a French embassy in America, it's French soil. So what happens is if a person is born on the embassy grounds, they are an American citizen. So there are situations where people check in with an American embassy when, say, they're in France, and they have some facility. So what happens is if they are born, they are born on the embassy lot, which is American territory. So they become born on American soil. American soil embraces all states, territories such as Puerto Rico, protectorates like American Guam, a naval base, air base, an army base, a Marine Corps encampment, a canal zone, on a bridge leading from a foreign country, say Canada or Mexico, into the United States. That kind of thing. An embassy, whatever it may be, that's deemed under American law American soil, born on American soil. And that's by treaty. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says that the government is bound to follow the law of nations, and that's part of the treaty stuff. Article 6 of the Constitution says ratified treaties are part of the supreme law of the land. So when you have a treaty situation with a foreign government about that, that's what applies. Yeah, but see, those treaty situations are important because we've got treaty relationships with various countries that anticipate this. Another thing that is going to be apparent is this very grave, important factor. You tend to write laws generally so that when a specific instance that deviates from the norm comes up, you rely on the wisdom of the people that are charged with interpreting and applying the law. The courts or senior officials or whatever it may be, they're supposed to be wise and experienced in the ways of the world and the subject matter they're dealing with. But that is not always the case now. And we have had this whole thing where for 50 years we've been taught manifest distrust of the people that traditionally humanity trusted to display wisdom. We do not like wisdom because wisdom implies that there's something about somebody that is more profound or better than what you have going for you. So everybody's supposed to be on the same level. You're 18 years old and you call a 68-year-old man who is a professor emeritus or a known scholar or a profound businessman or somebody that represents you or whatever, and you call them by their first name like they're one of your buddies off of the playground you just left out of high school. See, so we have this innate disrespect for experience and gravitas and achievement these days. So we don't like to show what goes along with that, which is you respect their judgment. We don't respect anything now. We don't even respect ourselves. So this is.
Trump was incorrect saying that we're the only one. However, I think what he was just saying in a quick, short phrase, and what other people have said, because I've heard that, first of all, it's damn near impossible to get a citizenship or even dual citizenship, for instance, in Mexico, unless you have a relative or you're married or something like that. So where I'm coming from is it depends on a country, but the difference between them and us, it is less red tape, less paperwork. And for example, when my daughter and her husband at the time, they went to Morocco, he could have automatically become a resident, even though he was born here in America, but his parents from Egypt. So, and then he's Muslim. And the reason why he could have became a resident and then he could have added my daughter and the kids as residents under him is because he's Muslim and he has Egyptian lineage, Arab lineage. So depending on the country, you have less paperwork depending on your religion.
Well, it depends on where you are from and what their standards of citizenship are. But generally,
he could have not been from America. He could have been in. because he was Muslim, that's number one, and definitely, and then also Arab lineage out of Egypt. But number one is because he was Muslim, and that is a Muslim country.
I get that, but that's not what I'm talking about. Each country can decide what it classifies as a citizen, but there's some pretty general parameters that are damn near universal. That's one of them we've been talking about the impact of dual citizenship. It is sometimes a big problem, and a lot of people have that problem. Now, there are ways around it. There are treaties. There are things about diplomacy. There are things that deal with what is sovereign territory. Like embassies for the last 2,500 years have been deemed part of the sovereign territory of the country they're embassies for, whether you're talking about Greek situations with Persia, or you're talking about Rome dealing with Gaul, or Rome dealing with Spain, or Rome dealing with Egypt. An embassy was deemed to be part of the territory of the country that had the embassy there. It was a convenience because it is in the advantage for countries to talk with each other through their ambassadors, which is an ancient office. It goes back thousands of years. So this tradition is part of American law. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says the U.S. shall respect and enforce, quote, the law of nations, unquote, and that's an ancient part of it. It's common law, international common law. So it does cause problems, especially after World War II. You had people of German descent, Italian descent, a lot of Italian descended people, and a lot of Japanese people on the West Coast who got caught up into the technology of dual citizenship and what that meant. I gave you an example of some cases that were in front of the U.S. Supreme Court relative to Japanese citizenship, but you also had that with Italian folk. Go back to the old country to visit relatives, and somebody's born there back in 1912, 1917, 1819. And by the time they grow up, they might be considered by El Duce to be citizens of Italy and inducted into or drafted into the Italian military, which causes all kinds of problems. So these things came up. I live in a place in Memphis as a suburb. It's called Germantown. There are a lot of Germantowns in the United States. And in both World War I and World War II, we had a problem with folk who had dual citizenship with the Weimar Republic, with the Kaiser and his boys, and before that, the various provinces and the principalities of Germany, Saxony, Pomerania, Prussia, you name it. So we've had those problems for a very, very long time. They're not new. It's just that the public is left ignorant because the newspapers do not discuss these things at length because they are boring to a lot of people. So they're trying to maximize the entertainment value of their news reporting. And we don't know.